Greetings and salutations one and all. This is Cuscopia once again, still a professional game developer, still a self-published author of several books, here to talk to you about The Curse of the Golden Flower, written and produced in the early 2000s, released in 2006. Its historical depiction of a numerous and plentiful empire stands out more than anything, perhaps even more so than the actual story of a tragic operatic drama about the most powerful, most privileged family on earth coming undone under the weight of their secrets and, well, bad living. We'll be discussing the divinity of these regal characters who nonetheless present themselves as purely human, flawed, and self-destructive. How our emperor, whose primary goal is to guarantee correct rulership over the lands and its people, is perhaps not as much in the wrong as the audience might believe. We'll discuss how amazing the movie looked and how they attempt to express the astonishing scale of operations involved with a Chinese court. And as ever, we will rank the movie. And how do we rank movies in this oh glorious of spaces? Thank you for asking. We put them all on a suggestion grade scale, making use of the plus and minus as a subgrade that we add to the movies. And we start with must rewatch, an S, then we have must watch, can rewatch, can watch, should not rewatch, should not watch, do not rewatch, and do not watch, which I call trash grade. So stick around and bask in the powerful imagery, which I hope not to reduce too much with my YouTube spiel. And so we begin with a synopsis. And I'm afraid that I'm going to be a bit anal about a few translations before we even start. Though to be fair, I kind of agree with 2 out of the 3 decisions that we're gonna quickly discuss. The first one is the actual name of this production. You see, the Chinese title literally translates to "The entire city is full of golden armor," which is a lot less spoilerific than the tragedy-infused Curse of the Golden Flower. But it's understandable the English title needed to be changed, and since the chrysanthemum, the golden flower, and the festival it represents for the sake of our state features so prominently, I like the change. The second one, which I think is really unnecessary, is the one I don't like, is that they date the movie. The English translation will put a sub at the very start saying Tang Dynasty, year 1928. Connected to this is the third, which I'm okay with, is that it calls our protagonist couple Emperor and Empress, rather than King and Queen, the original Chinese language titles. The big difference here is that the Emperor and Empress are ruling over all of China. That's what those titles signify culturally speaking, but a King and Queen would be more so the rulers of a province or a small collection of. All this to say that this movie is as much historical fiction as Troy might be, or Master and Commander, in that the time and life experience attempt to be historical, while everything else is very much fiction, and this is not how the English translation will present it with the dating and stuff. So I think the dating historically is really unnecessary, but again, in my humble opinion, changing the titles to Emperor and Empress actually makes sense. You see, in terms of visuals, presentation, demeanor, the whole palace, I believe the authors and makers of this movie were completely depicting an imperial family in, all but name. For whatever political reason or cultural reason, they decided to be vague about even the rulership status of this family. I think they really didn't want any clear historical association, nor to ascribe to any dynastic ruling family the tragic mess that you're about to see described. Unfortunately for them, every imperial family's history is exhaustively recorded. So you get no dates and the titles of King and Queen, but I do believe their purpose was still to depict an imperial court. Just my theory though. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get through the synopsis in our usual over-detailed way with perhaps too much commentary. The palace awakens, the servants first of all. Untold numbers set about an untold number of tasks with practice, not to say formalized confidence and efficiency. Everyone knows what they're doing as they get the empress, moving to purpose for the ceremony. The woman looks off, weird, and indeed receives some medicine on her way. which she hesitates to take. She meets with the first prince, which we assume is her son, and a love affair is immediately revealed to have happened between them and having been ended very recently. In fact, he plans to ask his father to leave the palace and her. Also, she reveals she's not his real mother, though the first time I watched I didn't quite get that at once, because when I say she reveals, she's like, "I'm not your mother! You know, I'm your lover," or whatever, but she's actually not her birth mother, his birth mother. And we're also presented to the third brother, just a nice kid there trying to get noticed. It doesn't really matter. It seems as though the second brother is returning, hence the ceremony that everybody's being woken up to. All of the officials and family are there, but a messenger promptly runs across the palace and says, "Hear ye, hear ye. Ceremony is cancelled. The emperor went to meet his son alone on some solitary outpost." So, well, everyone is left standing there all geared up for nothing. It's hilarious and a great opening. It masterfully displays the scale of rulership that we're operating at, and let's say the flippancy with which the emperor acts. You know, he didn't really personally let his own family know anything. Anyway, the second son is coming back from the war. It seems like he's the most competent, most promising son, so the emperor is planning to name him the successor. The first son, despite being denied the request to leave, accepts this quite easily, saying he's even suggested it himself. Soon, it is revealed he has an affair with the daughter of the court doctor and is trying to find an excuse to leave the deeply watched palace life so he can live a life with her. Because otherwise, you know, they're two different statuses, they can't be together. The Empress eventually discovers that the so-called medicine is poisoned with something that will make her mad and delirious in due time and eventually kill her. And we discover she is plotting a revolution with the aid of a general. And upon some convincing, her firstborn, the second son, the warrior son who just came back. So, to recap, the emperor is poisoning his own wife, the empress, while having decided to name his second son the successor, who meanwhile agreed to help with the revolution being plotted by his mother, the empress, who loves his half-brother, the first prince, who is wanting to elope with the court doctor's daughter, both of whom are the only ones besides the emperor who know of the empress's poisoning. Oh yeah, and the third prince is around, just there, happy to be there. Why is the emperor poisoning the empress? Is a revolutionary plot truly just a response to that threat? How does it all pan out? Watch the movie. Or wait for the spoiler segment where I will discuss the crazy theory that the emperor is the good guy in all of this. But for now, let's talk about the cast. Disclaimer, Cuscope is not legally accountable for any horrible misspellings of Chinese names spoken in English with his weird accent, and he thoroughly apologizes for any mistakes done. What an amazing performance by pretty much all involved, and what a success of casting, because the more prominent the character, the better the actor's performance, starting with the protagonist duo, our imperial couple. Gong Li's range of emotion and eye-only communication is unmatched in the entire movie. The betrayal, the shame, the indignity, the fury and rage, the passion, to put it simply, that emanates from her in every direction that the story twists it towards. What an acting star to look so crazed and then driven and then cold and calculating, but also in love and also very saddened and distressed. Yes, she's great in this. Chow Yun-fat lives up to his name and eats up every scene that is in. In this drama, he gives perhaps his best performance ever, emitting his imperial aura in all its forms. Whether he's checking pulses for the health state of his son, fighting his other son, sitting regally in judgment, spurred to a rage or to a deep, deep sorrow, my man is just an emperor. It's crazy how good he is in this. Then you go down the line and everyone is just great, though I would point out and give a special mention to Yi Liu as the first prince. The sheer dichotomy of being a beta loser abused by his mother-in-law and just wanting to run away, but also turning out to be as wise as his father and fully loyal to him and imperial law that rules them all, I think he plays the very complex part to a T. The other brothers are more straightforward and simple characters, respectively the straight man and the young boy, and that's it. Sets and costumes. While the actors can make the writing believable and the directors can make it real, nobody can immerse the audience into the world where everything is happening like those people responsible for what I'm calling sets and costume. In truth, there is a lot of CGI work in this movie, which is something that shocked me to find out even after a first viewing, as in even after 2 viewings or 3 viewings, I don't know how many times I've watched this movie. The notion of the imperial palace being city-sized is accurately portrayed here with how they visualize the family's place of ceremonial supper, a podium-like location symbolizing the mandate of heavens and everything in its place. As well, throughout the movie, it is never in doubt that the inhabitants of the city palace wear not so much clothes as they wear artfully produced uniforms or dresses, all formalized according to station, role, and task being carried out. This is also signified by their manners, how much they get to speak, how close to the imperial family they are placed, and so forth. Thanks to the effort of this gigantic team, the audience hardly has to imagine what it would be like to be transported into an imperial court at the height of a dynasty's power and prosperity. They already did most of the work. And by they, I also mean direction and writing. Let's start by talking Yimou Zhang, arguably China's most prolific and successful director of modern times, if not of all time. I mean, since his debut in 1988 with Red Sorghum, a many awards-winning drama that also happens to star Gong Li, this man has put out a movie a year pretty much every year, and with no sign to stop, as just this year he released Article 20, a modern law drama that has also won many awards, though only in China so far. His debut, to be clear, has a lot of indie awards internationally, just for curiosity's sake. Also for curiosity's sake, one of the few times he took a sabbatical was right after directing The Great Wall, an apparently mostly Western production with him presiding over American stars Matt Damon, Dafoe, and even Pedro Pascal. Anyway, without pause, let's move on, keep on with the video. The more important curiosity, alright, the relevant curiosity for this segment is that this man, Yimou Zhang, is responsible for the international mega hits that followed in the wake of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, directed by one of, if not the man responsible for the arguably adverb that I inserted before, that is to be Ang Lee. Also, it was starring Chow Yun-fat. Yimou Zhang made the absolutely historical piece of cinema that is Hero and the phenomenal House of Flying Daggers. Curse of the Golden Flower came out soon after. Suffice it to say, he has had quite a run, or I should maybe put it another way, he is running quite a marathon, and with that, the portfolio glazing ends. I would think him mainly responsible for the awe-striking scale of the presentation on display in a lot of these scenes, from the multitude of people and how he so easily tells the story of hundreds of people, perhaps thousands, all doing individual tasks to accomplish grander tasks, some of them so insanely out of reach, like cleaning a football field of any side of a horrible war involving tens of thousands of people in a matter of minutes, or attacking a castle with a veritable army of ninjas, because yes, in this movie, you don't see a servant placing medicine to the Empress's lips. She is stopped in her march, and 5 people aid in the service, while 10 other attendants await to carry on the march because at least 6 of them are making sure her robes don't drag across the floor, all while dozens more attendants and guards stand about in their offices and duties. Likewise, you don't just send one ninja, you send an army of them. I'll also mention the action, which is very wuxia and competently made, though clearly it was not a focus like in the other movies I mentioned. Likely this was why this movie wasn't as well regarded with the international audience, which was expecting another action experience of choreographic beauty to one-up the previous ones. It is competent, but truly nothing to write home about. In my opinion, it's merely the sprinkle on an otherwise drama-focused production with a high historical ambition. Even at their average though, the greats are what they are. Anyway, a large part of presenting the scale and imperial reality of such a setting comes from the writing. So Yimou Zhang seems to be a co-writer in all of his most awarded, highly regarded projects, but alongside him his main credited writer Zi Hongbang and Nan Yu, and Yu Kao is credited with the play that the movie is adapting, Thunderstorm, first written and performed in 1933, if you can imagine, before the Japanese invasion that would precede the start of World War II. It is considered to be a pivotal work in China modern theater, and it was his very first. Prodigies adapting prodigies, eh? Really quickly, Thunderstorm tells a pretty similar story but using a mining business family Zhao. Plot's pretty similar, with the goal being to deconstruct the pretty notion of the high-class rich by presenting their multi-level self-destruction by way of incestual relationships and downright familial oppression. Yu Kao just came out of the gate swinging, compensating for what he might have lacked technically, since he was new, with extremely provocative themes for the time. Also, this might give you a hint as to why our depiction of an emperor is so bereft of an army of concubines, because it is adapted from not a royal family, just a business family. That might be why they don't have that aspect in the movie so much. In any case, there's much more to the writing of this movie than the plot points and developing intrigue, because they changed the environment completely, as I just said, to be an early millennium dynastic court, and they need to write for that. The dialogue, super formal when in public settings but more informal in private conversations, wouldn't be that different from those written of a high-class, very rich business family. It's actually kind of funny, because almost every scene starts with some royal member ordering all the servants out of the room. The spying too tied to the fact that the royal members walk about like independent monarchs, all with their singular territories and dedicated servant. When the first prince hurts himself in a mad explosion of emotion over finding out his mother's plots, he is visited in turn by his parents, each with their own background entourage. As well, the way they write the emperor's character, and these are details that also make me think it's wise to name him emperor rather than literally translate him to king, is following the concept of the Confucian ruler, the scholar warrior ruler that typically we expect the emperor to be like. He is shown to be the best warrior in the movie, and indeed he mentions having been in a long period of fighting in war. He is the foremost expert in medicine, as well, personally giving the court doctor, the would-be actual expert, all of his instructions. He's even shown doing a pulse check, a very common diagnostic procedure that Eastern doctors use, well, more accurately, those practicing actual Chinese medicine. They touch your wrist and they kind of feel through internal energy what might be wrong with you, or how ill you are. He's also shown to be a philosopher in some of his brief explanations of the square table in the round square and the mandate of the heavens, and he wins both at strategy and tactics. In short, they wrote him as the best warrior, wisest philosopher, smartest general, most cunning political figure, most practiced doctor, and just downright successful ruler if we're to look at the grandiosity of the achievements on display. In short, they wrote him as an emperor, the foremost expert on every domain of knowledge, as is his responsibility, which is why it's so cool to see a story involving him just losing everything. Anyway, more than the intrigue, I've ever been impressed with the environment and the interaction between the characters and how they express to the audience the untouched nobility of these people while still showing that they are still just people. However, the intrigue is solid as hell. Every character motivation is understandable with very minimal exposition. The twists and turns happen organically to the surprise of both the audience and the characters themselves. The story means to present the self-destruction of the divine imperial family, and it does so by making use of the character's humanity rather than any forced contrivances. With all of that said, it is time to rank Curse of the Golden Flower. It's a must rewatch, honestly. This movie portrays the actual unmitigated divinity of an imperial family. Many times have I heard the moniker living like gods, but seldom have I actually seen it represented so accurately. And in fact, not only can you peer into an authentic rendition of a lifestyle like this, but this movie still maintains that flawed humanity of its characters very realistic. They're neither perfectly regal and moral gods, nor are they all pathetic, sniveling, mewling monarchs whose respect and deference we can never understand. I do suggest you watch Curse of the Golden Flower for the great performances, a uniquely great representation of Chinese imperial court life, and the scale at which it operates as ruling over the greatest landmass and the largest amount of people for most of human known history. As well, the expression of human divinity, and in doing so, the study on what a mistake it is to even attempt such a thing. As this movie demonstrates, the human can never be God. Thank you for watching. I will now go on to the spoiler section, where I will essentially talk about how the rest of the movie goes and explore a fun theory I have that the Emperor is actually a good guy trying to rule wisely and well for the sake of his people and sons. But this Empress that he had to marry to get to that point is just ruining everything, and, in fact, succeeds in her self-destructive obsession to hurt him in every way she can. And how, really? You kind of get it that she would do that. Come back after you watch the movie, or if you don't care about spoilers, stick around. But most of all, like, subscribe, blah blah blah. Mouth noises, let's fill some time. Mouth noises, let's fill some time. So, as we said at the beginning, the Empress is revealed to have had an affair with the first prince, which has recently ended from his part. This is because he's involved with the court doctor's daughter. The person who reveals to the Empress that she's being poisoned is the court doctor's wife, and she does this out of revenge because she was the Emperor's first wife, keep up, be attentive, and she was also birth mother to the first prince, which delivers the incest storyline that completely breaks the poor girl into an utter freakout. Pretty solid plotline, just really quickly. Only the court doctor and daughter knew about the poisoning, so it makes sense that his wife, if anyone, would be able to find out. Meanwhile, she was motivated to do this because not only does she want to hurt the Emperor, she also wants to see her son in the palace, and a way to get into the palace is to report to the Empress about the poisoning. Because of her affection to the first prince, the Empress tries to give him a robe that is clearly marked with the sign of rebellion, so he doesn't get hurt. Smart Alec that he is, he deduces as such, and from that the rebellion is in play. After attempting suicide and surviving it, this guy just can't do anything right. The Emperor tells him that he knew of his affair with his wife, and the guilt of this, probably the first and only time he sees his dad hurting, it prompts him to tell the Emperor of the rebellion. To that complexity, we add that the Empress tells the second son that all of this happened, but even knowing the Emperor most certainly knows, she spurs him on in this weird, unspoken suicide pact. I remind you, she tells the second son that she's doing it because the Emperor is poisoning her. That's the reason she gives for the rebellion. So, the Emperor perfectly prepares for the rebellion, but the third prince catches them all off guard because it's such an afterthought, even to the audience. So he kills the first prince and then gets beaten to death by the Emperor. Like, he completely fails and he just gets beaten to death by a very rageful Emperor. After the second son gets defeated in another hilarious display of the scale of their status, where you see like hundreds of men dying to make sure they capture the boy alive. He is offered clemency if only he feeds the medicine, which is to say the poison, to the Empress. He kills himself instead. And note, he does it well and quicker, you know, the first prince should learn something. Anyway, she also refuses to drink, throws the drink away, at which point it gets revealed that it was acid. Alright, on with my theory, which is essentially this. The Emperor is trying to observe the mandate of the heavens and be a model ruler with a model ruling family for his people to emulate and aspire to. The Empress is on a suicidal warpath, sacrificing anything and everything just to hurt him and destroy everything that he cares about. That is the thesis, which is quite anti-thesis of what I think you would expect from the trailer or even what you will get from a full viewing. I believe the most common interpretation is that the Emperor is just a megalomaniac monster screwing the Empress for no reason. Let's have some fun and defend my theory though. So, the Empress is planning the rebellion because she's being poisoned, which is what she tells her son. Here's the problem with that. And mind you, my detective work is highly dependent on the translation, so do forgive the deep dive if the translations are just wrong. The Empress is very clearly told the poison has been added to the medicine only 10 days ago.
我吃了你父王10几年的药，10天前他突然换了药方。
So if that's a mistranslation, that's a problem, right? Part of the rebellion involves obsessively knitting golden chrysanthemums and embroidering them into clothes, and it's soon revealed the amount of uniforms are around 10,000. She tells the second son she just plans to make the emperor abdicate, but she obviously wants him, like, just look at this.
母后会杀父王吗？
我只想逼他退位，我不会杀他。
This is what I mean by, like, a lot of this movie is show and no tell, zero tell. It's just show. You need to read between the lines and see how the actors are performing, because they're very good at telling you exactly, like, the truth of the matter, even though it doesn't get said. Anyway, her troops numbering 10,000, and it's revealed they're being led by a big-time general who also seems to be loyal to her.
1万多。
王后让陈公公交给吴氏了。
是兵部的吴氏郎。
是啊。
Meanwhile, she finds out about the poisoning on the day the second son returns to the palace. So it isn't like she found out 10 days ago. But even then, am I supposed to believe she set this all up on the suspicion that she was being poisoned? And all in 10 days? Of course not. Something like that is at least months, if not years. Other lines of dialogue do in fact betray the fact that she has been difficult since forever. The medicine is for anemia, which the emperor diagnoses from the fact she talks back a lot.
脾气焦躁，遇事毫无兴致，整天冷言冷语，这就是虚寒症。
Imagine that. She's been taking it for many years to apparently little effect, but suddenly the emperor decides to start poisoning her. The reason he wants her to die a slow, unexplained death is because she's the daughter of a prominent political figure, so he can't just have her assassinated, which is to say, dying in an accident. Weird illness afflicts everyone though at any time, very tragic. But why would he decide to start doing it? It could be he just got tired of her attitude, or that he only recently found out about her affair with his son of another woman.
你们的私情，我早已经知道了。从那天开始，我每一个晚上都无法合眼。
So again, if this translation is correct, and the acting, I don't think so. I think he knew for years. I put it to you, while he didn't know how far along she was in her plot, that he found out there was a plot, and thus started to poison her with a maddening fungus so that the whole thing might fall away before being enacted, so that the situation could be resolved without having to kill all 10,000 and their general. After all, the general's support would certainly bow out if she started acting crazy, let alone ill. He was going to make her favorite son, and the one who loved her the most, the crown prince, not only because he was the most competent and ambitious, but so that he might not retaliate. In turn, he wants to keep his first son, the one he most loves and who most loves him, ever safe and happy. I truly think this is what was going on. Just a bunch of really carefully laid out 5 birds, 1 stone kind of plot, counterplot actually, against her supposed plot that he didn't completely know the details of, and that's what was going on. He was just trying to avoid a great loss of life in any public faux pas involving the divine imperial family who holds the mandate of the heavens. The Empress, however, manages to outmaneuver him on both accounts, all because of his first wife, whom he did not know still lived. She uses the poisoning to convince the second son to help her onto ultimate death, which he pushes him on to not once, but 3 individual times. At the end, with the rebellion having been fully enacted and with 2 of his sons dead, the emperor offers the second son the possibility to avoid punishment by personally feeding the poison to his mother for the rest of her days. He kills himself instead, and soon after, the acid. So, in fact, the second prince would have only served it once. Even at the end, the emperor tries to salvage the situation and steal his descendant from her grasp, but fails, her grasp having been just too tight. I love this exchange because you can see how the emperor recognizes that she has the second son's utter loyalty.
这是为了母后。
You see that look? He knows there is nothing he can say to convince him otherwise. No analytical breakdown of her terrible manipulations and lies. All he can do is what he always does, which is exert his authority and demand obedience and respect so that the prince might do the one act of obedience to the emperor, read the empire, that would release him from obedience to her. Alas, it also fails. The idea the emperor is an evil tyrant doesn't wash with the fact he knew about the rebellion and his wife's infidelity with his first son and was still trying to find a way to not kill them all, as he did with his second son. Here, he didn't want to kill him. The only person he really went mad on was the third son, because he just killed the first. So yeah guys, I think that no matter the dubious circumstances of his rise to power, which seems to have involved getting rid of his first wife, so the aforementioned political figure would accept to give his daughter's hand, the emperor was trying to salvage the situation, keep his regal family regal and united and headed towards a prosperous future, all for the sake of their responsibilities as receivers of the mandate of the heavens, ultimate rulers of the people and dictators, but also wardens of their fate. Now, all of that being said, time to break down the Empress's motivations and defend her a little bit, because you might assume she's some tenebrous schoolgirl old lady taking advantage of the first prince's young innocent, or you might assume that that's what I'm saying. No, the context is actually that their age difference must have not been much at all. For sure, the gap between her age and the emperor's would have likely been much larger than hers and the first prince's. As we saw in the last video, the way things used to work, especially for nobility, is that as soon as the girls get their period, there's a ceremony about it that socially serves to publicize that she is now marriage material. The more valuable the girl, the faster she gets married. The most common thing in history, thus, when it comes to powerful and political marriages, is to see a teen girl getting married to a man in his late 40s, or becoming his concubine, right? That kind of union. So she and her union, calling that a union. Anyway, so she and her first prince were likely an Anakin Amidala situation, if even that. She's like new in the court and he's there and they're almost of an age and they mostly spend time with each other because they're imperial family members. They can't really deal with other people in the palace at ease. A variety of scenes demonstrate how she actually loves the guy, unrequited as it might be. Meanwhile, the emperor very clearly married her just for power and still loves the wife he thought he had killed and then definitely has killed. So our empress has grown up without ever being able to leave the palace and will indeed die there. Suffice it to say that the woman was miserable, just wasting away living a deplorably lonely life, and things were only getting worse. It is no wonder the scorn and hate eventually got the better of her, kinda like it did her youngest son, only in a very different way. Still, at the end of the day, I do like that expression, theories aside, this is a wonderful movie about the dangers of wielding one's authority so implacably. The obsession with destiny, greater good, legacy and reputation can lead to, and indeed, it often does lead to, the utter destruction of everything that is held dear. The emperor's primary concern was the dignity and reputation of his office, and while it is incredibly virtuous to become a master in every domain of knowledge, it is very much less so to completely disregard the humanity of the people, and even worse, those he most loves. To ignore their wants, to believe their ambitions and desires should be subjugated to the mandate of the heavens, which is to say, really, his ambitions and desires. No matter how constructive they might be, that is ever the path to push people away. And when you push people away, but at the same time you don't give them room to be away, tragedy certainly unfolds. And indeed, I should end by saying that, well, many such cases. This is Cuscopia, signing out. Have a wonderful week, everybody.